Hello and welcome to the LCS Dome for this Sunday edition of Countdown, where for 30 minutes we look at the race for Honda MVP and hear from the coaches clashing in Cloud9 versus Team Liquid until the timer reaches 0 and we jump into Champions Select. Now, as we turn to the standings, each team has got 5 games left in the regular split, which means we're narrowing in on the playoff picture. There you can see Cloud9, Team Liquid both locked into the postseason already with their 11-2, 10-3 records apiece. Down there at the bottom, the 3-win teams, Dignitas Immortals, have to turn it on starting now if they want to make any kind of a run for the top 8. It's important to note that FlyQuest picked up 2 solid wins this week, inching them closer to locking playoffs, while EG hopes to do the same in Game 1 today.
Those wins were huge, especially since FlyQuest was able to take down Team Liquid, and that is actually a huge deal. Now they have a head-to-head advantage, and it also means that FlyQuest is no longer in that sad mood that they were thinking about before, that they wanted to get out of, and that they're actually just getting it down by adding diversity to their draft. Solo carrying a game was huge news for them.
Crumbs, that's a very professional take. I want to hear from the twins on the other side.
I was about to say, you know what's a bigger deal? Is the fact that Prawley stole my shirt. That's
what's going on,
Mark
dudes.
texted me. He's like, hey, what are you wearing today? And I was like, that's a weird question. But, you know, I'm just wearing a light blue shirt.
I got
And
short
look what this
sleeves.
guy
I'm the
does.
cool guy. You're the one with the long sleeve.
I roll up the sleeves feels nice.
Oh, he's got the roll-up. He's got the roll-up. But that's almost like he's even more trying to match you, Mark. A nice coincidence there. One thing from yesterday's games, though, that made us scratch our heads was an interesting item build. And so as we handed over to our casters, the State Farm analyst Resident Prophet wanted to share some crumbs of wisdom from a player who once died to Rift Herald in a professional game.
Hey there, did you know that Phantom Dancer does not stack with Hex Drinker? Doesn't stack with Maw either.
Thank you very much, Crumbs, and welcome to the Caster Desk. There is a lot of exciting games to be had today, and of course, we'll be bringing you all the action here, the 4 of us, or the 4 games, the 2 of us. It's off to a good start, okay? We're warming up into it. It's going to be fine. Let's take a look at the schedule of the 4 games that we have in store at discount prices, or whole cost, who knows. Dignitas versus EG in Game 1, and then a battle for first place shortly after with Cloud9 versus Team Liquid. Then another chapter in the ever-going CLG versus TSM saga. Then Golden Guardians opposite 100 Thieves to wrap out the weekend.
Yeah, and of course, we are all excited for the battle at the top. Team Liquid versus Cloud9. Everybody's been waiting to see this clash at the top of the LCS. But also, that last game of the day is incredibly important because of how close Golden Guardians and 100 Thieves are in the standings.
Yeah, right now, the important thing to look at is that while top 8 all make playoffs, if you get 6th or above, you get into the upper bracket to start things out. 7-8 starts lower bracket, means you're one and done. If you lose, you're out. 100 Thieves are in 7th. And Golden Guardians are up above them by a couple of games. And the important thing is that Golden Guardians currently are 1-0 in the head-to-head. So if 100 Thieves drops this game as well, they're down 2 games under Golden Guardians, plus 0-2 in the head-to-head, which makes getting out of the bottom 2 playoff spots that much harder, which is why that game is so important to me specifically.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you start in the loser's bracket, then, you know, 1 loss and you're out. You don't want to be going out of playoffs that early. I really want to focus on that matchup a little bit more because it's 2 aggressive teams that are going against each other. A lot of the other teams we've seen have been going for scaling comps, but both these teams have actually had some shared champion pools, especially after 100 Thieves made their roster swaps. You see with the shared Galio, that's the main pick that I'm looking at between these 2 matchups because Damonte has obviously used it extremely well, but since they put in contracts in Poom, Ryoma switched from using those super long range later game carries like Azir, Orianna, Cassiopeia type of stuff, and their 2 wins recently were both with him on Galio, a champion that he can use to back up Contract's aggressive jungling. And so that's one of the main things, in addition to the jungle matchup, that I think is going to spark a lot of action in this game. You know, obviously, Closer and Contracts, 2 of the junglers that like to play very heavy invade styles the most in the LCS.
Yeah, going to be a whole bunch of fun. Of course, all 4 games, very exciting today, so stay tuned for all of them. But that's what we're looking at here coming into the day. Until then, back to you, Dash.
Thank you very much, Freak. Now, at the end of the regular split, only weeks away, I wanted to look at the race for Honda MVP, where there's potential for more contenders in this race in Summer Split than there were in Spring, to say for sure. But I think when we kick off this conversation, we would be doing a disservice to the title of Honda MVP if we didn't first talk about the possible repeat from a player like Blabber, our defending Honda MVP from Spring.
There's no one that stands out in a specific role as far ahead of the competition than Blabber does in the jungle department. Whether it's the stats where he reigns in first in pretty much everything that is all time, or his win rate, his aggression, this guy is really doing so much for the team. Now, the interesting caveat is that he doesn't do it alone. He only achieves this because the rest of the team revolves around making sure that the jungler has the best time possible, that he has as many resources, that his compositions are about getting him to carry. So it's a bit of how much is it Blabber and how much is it C9, but hey, he still delivers with the resources that are given to him and really exceeds the competition in playing this way.
Exactly. I was going to say, just because he gets more resources doesn't mean that their resources wasted. He uses them so well, and the entire team's play style is at its best when it's revolved around Blabber being the main primary focus. And if that's going to get you near undefeated seasons, then that clearly speaks volumes about the player that you're playing around.
Yeah, he gets the resources. He does big things with it, but I think we have to acknowledge a couple of the players surrounding him. Of course, the two solo laners definitely pull their weight on Cloud9. Let's start in the top lane, Mark, with Licorice.
Yeah, you're talking about, no one dominates their category quite as hard, their field. I would actually posit that Licorice is doing better. That plus 20 CSD is an all-time record right now. If he can keep it around there, he will actually grab the record for greatest CSD at 15 in North America. The closest right now, he'd be for a split. Bjergsen had a 2015 split, which was plus 18.9, if I remember correctly. So if he can keep this up, he will grab the title of best CSD at 15 for a split all-time any lane. That's pretty huge, and that's why I think he has inserted himself further into the conversation this time around. The sheer dominance that's coming out of him every single game cannot be understated.
Probably thoughts on Licorice?
Yeah, usually the funny part about like the winning teams like top laner, usually there's like contention for others to be better than the top laner of the best team because top lane is usually like an island. So I know last week we had a lot of talk about like Someday or Licorice. Like now going into summer, like Licorice is playing even better than he did before, and he's not doing it with that many resources. So he's like playing new champion. He's like dominating these stats, and he's not getting so much attention that you could say like they're a top focused team. So far he's just playing way more impressive than any other top laner.
Mark, I'm glad you brought some more stats with you for this argument. I thought the fact that he was the first to play Wukong would have been enough for you to make him the Honda MVP.
Hey, he's got a great champ pool.
Let's talk Niski as well, though, in the mid lane. Probably thoughts on this guy, because statistically isn't eclipsing a bunch of people, but we can't ignore his importance to Cloud9.
Yeah, Niski's like the intangible player. He doesn't have these crazy, insane laning stats or anything like that, but he's just invaluable to his team. His characteristic is he makes his team better. The way Blabber plays is enabled by the way Niski sacrifices his lane, the way he influences the map. So this is a mid laner who's famous for not focusing on mid lane, but empowering his team. And that's such a hard skill set to have because you can't really coach it. This player just has to like believe in it and then find his own way, find his own inspiration. So I think it's really hard to get where Niski is. And I'm really happy we have a player like that in NA.
And to be fair, the only bad stat that he has is his CSD, which is very easy to track why it's low when you see him all over the map getting kills and assists for his team. His kills and assists at 15 and all these numbers are through the roof. It's only that one laning stat that seems low, and you can easily see why that's happening if you just watch the games.
Now, time to turn our focus a little outward to possible players and individuals that might challenge some of these core C9 members for the title of Honda MVP. Team Liquid seems like the natural contender, and in fact, the stylistic opposite of Niski. Jensen is what we're looking at.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't think of two guys further apart in terms of playstyle, but Jensen doesn't get much jungle help. He's not comboing with Broxah all over the map. He's mostly staying in his lane and getting huge laning advantages, and then people come to him once he has those.
And those laning advantages he often gets against opponents that are clearly worse than him, which is a really strong trait. So many times some of our top teams have individuals that might lose lane or not get ahead versus matchups that they definitely should have. So Jensen's consistency allows him to get to a place where you can just make plays around him all the time. Now, does his team come to his lane and help him out a lot? Sure, but that's because he can't find those leads. Now, if he doesn't get those laning advantages, that's when things get tricky for Team Liquid.
Yeah, reliable mid laner is Jensen, a very strong one at that. Crumbs, you mentioned the fact that Team Liquid will play around that mid lane. His teammates will come and pay attention to that mid lane. Core JJ, former Honda MVP himself, has got to be the final guy in the conversation right now for the title.
Absolutely. Core JJ has been really striking in our recent memory because of his 4 Bard games back-to-back. He's been able to just hard carry team fights. He helps out his lane from the get-go, setting up your little heal shrines from the start. He's able to roam a ton and influence the map in ways that the enemy's not anticipating. And because Bard is so powerful right now in the meta, he looks even better because of it. So he needs to be on these picks that have a ton of agency, and he looks amazing on it. On the flip side, what happens if you don't get Core JJ out of the laning phase? How much does he shine? Well, he still can do a lot with these champions. I just want to see what he's got in store beyond this pick, because if he keeps riding the Bard train, he's making a really strong case for MVP.
He's done it once before. We'll see if he can do it again as we close out Week 7 here today. 2 weeks left for all of our individuals to make a case for Honda MVP. We're going to step away, but as we go, here's some more sage advice from a literal world champion.
And now, it's time for sage advice from a literal world champion.
Hey, did you know the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line? Look at that.
This has been sage advice from a literal world champion.
From the LCS team in sunny California, it's the return of LCS Game Show Week. Join us all weekend long for the competition, starting with Lane by Lane on Friday. Countdown, the game show, returns on Saturday with new games, new rules, and all your favorite contestants. Then, stick around for Sunday, where LCS Bingo gives fans the opportunity to win fabulous prizes.
Welcome back to the LCS Countdown. In just 6 short days, the LCS Game Show will be making its return to the countdown. And to be a part of the action, make sure you take the survey that will be used on Caster Feud. At LCS Official is where you'll find the link on Twitter. Make sure you join us next week, though, for the game show events every single broadcast day. Now, in Game 2, we have a battle for first place, where C9 coach Reapert feels he understands his opponents just fine heading into the match.
Not exactly. We are trying new stuff for this weekend because it is important to secure our first spot, and then we are already have 2 lost in our regular season, so we are trying to do like more comfortant things than before, and then we are trying to win the games. Regular season first place are really important. Like, for example, even before in the past, I had lots of finals before versus TSM or Team Liquid. Every time, I felt like kind of we lost because of they had a side choice, like side selection. Then that's big advantage for best of 5. Like 3 games, more game than opponents. You have one more side selection is pretty important things. So I want to secure that. And my players want to secure that first spot as well. So yeah, I'd like to say regular season first spot is really important.
Cloud9, I think confident as always coming in, but understanding the importance of this matchup. Team Liquid, on the other hand, they come into this battle for first after one of the most dramatic spring to summer bounce backs we've seen for a team in LCS history, Mark.
I mean, dramatic is the word for it, because you have to remember, even before that bad spring split, they were 4-time repeat LCS champions, back to back to back to back, as Captain Flowers said. And it was led by Doublelift, which was why it was so impressive. And then they go ahead, they bring in Broxy, they're trying to level up on the international stage, they get rid of Smithy, and it's a disaster. They're awful, they're struggling all split long, they finished 9th. There's pretty public disputes between the coaching staff, the players. Broxy showed up late. They swapped Doublelift out for Tactical in the offseason, they bring in Jat, and now they're tied for 2nd. It is such an insane dip that occurred in spring, and how quickly it bounced back with the roster changes.
And as go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, that void of dominance was easily taken up by Cloud9, though. They were not shy to make sure that there was somebody there to take advantage of Team Liquid's fall from grace, because Cloud9, with all these hungry new players, just suddenly wanted to win really badly. They embodied a much more aggressive style, which fits into the narrative of, hey, these guys really, really want to win. They start playing from the get-go, from minute one, and they just smoke the competition. It's kind of unfortunate that we don't get to see the 18-0, but the fact that the team is still the spearhead of the early game strategy, which is something that we have been just aching to see from North American teams, because we know that the failures of playing to scale internationally are still fresh in our minds. So we just want to see a team that plays like Cloud9 go compete against the world.
You talk about the dominance of Cloud9 probably all split long. We had, positioned the narrative of how exactly do you take down Cloud9. And before it was actually done for the first time by 100 Thieves, this Team Liquid game, the first time around, was the exact game we would reference every time in how you are best set up to beat Cloud9. You got to play with them early.
Yeah, and this was a big shock because on the analyst desk before this matchup had occurred, we were saying, Team Liquid's playing too slow. A lot of their wins are off of, enemy mistakes. So Cloud9 is just going to stomp them. But what ended up happening is our closest match ever against Cloud9 at the time, which was an 89% close ratio where there was no major deficit or major lead for either team. And Team Liquid actually was holding their own this entire game up until around 24 minutes. They had a gold lead against Cloud9, and Cloud9 were like, all right, they can maybe fumble the early game, but by 10 minutes, 15 minutes, Cloud9 just grows their lead exponentially. So to see Team Liquid, who we thought was just going to be a really slow team, probably roll over, fight back successfully for so long, really showed like Cloud9 can bleed, and Team Liquid was the one who started this.
Yeah, so many weeks later, now we are faced with the question of, can they carry it across the finish line, right? They had gotten to that 24-minute mark in fine position. Unfortunately, it slipped through their fingers. I do want to get all three of your takes on C9 versus TL, the matchup, but let's go lane by lane. And in doing so, we actually threw out a survey to our viewers and fans at home on Twitter to get their vote on how they would rank each of the individual matchups in this game, including the coaches. As you can see there, landslide victory for Cloud9 in almost all categories. The only category going to Team Liquid would be Core JJ at support, and many people do agree that the mid lane matchup is close, if anything. Mark?
I definitely think, for the most part, the fans have this pretty right. Some of the actual percentages might be a little bit larger in some categories than I think they should be, But I do think that overall, this does still feel, despite how close the records are, a pretty C9 favored matchup.
I think the voting for coaches is the one where I'm like, what influenced the fans even to gauge this one? What does it mean?
Emotions, Crumbs. What do you think?
Yeah, man. Hey, a lot of it is by feeling, I have to imagine, right? And again, there is kind of that aura that Cloud9 has of just dominance and that belief that they'll get it done. This is, of course, how the three of you landed on each of the individual matchups. Those sliders represent, the weighting of the matchup for each lane. So if it is positioned to the left of that middle mark on each of the lines, and the casters or analysts rather believe that it will be weighted towards that player. We're going to dive into each of these individually, though, to really get into the minutia. Let's start with a jungle hit. Blabber, Broxa, the one that all three of you think is heavily in favor of Cloud9.
It's partly because Blabber is so aggressive. He's the linchpin of Cloud9. So much of the team revolves around him making a play, and if the team's not there to back him up or he gets over-aggressive, he starts running it down. But he's the one making a lot of the plays happen, whereas for Team Liquid, Broxa plays a much more cleanup crew. He's not really being as involved as the team would like him to be, or at least what he says he'd like to be more involved in the action early. So that mismatch in assertiveness versus passiveness is, I think, what really skews the matchup in Blabber's favor.
All right, well, since that one feels fairly decided, at least from your perspective, I'm going to push us along to some of the roles that feel a little bit more contentious. Let's go to the top lane here. Interesting top lane matchup because, Mark, you talked about those impressive stats for Licorice being so dominant in lane, but Impact, he's like the spitting image of a guy who has consistency and reliability.
Right. I think it's this is one where I think the fans went a little bit too far in favor of Licorice. As much as I think he's an absolute beast, I do think Impact does hold his own quite well a lot of the time. He did come off a stinky Kennen game, but he bounces back really well, and I think the champ pool is where the biggest difference is between these two guys. Impact is pretty squarely in weak side play with the Ornn, the Shen, the Mordekaiser, even the Kennen, that when they try to play around him. Whereas Licorice can play some of those tanks, but he also plays a lot of scaling carry matchups like the KO, like the GP, and even was the first to break out that Wukong.
That Kennen was definitely weak side.
Yeah, get that off the graphic, please.
All right, probably from top lane, we head to mid lane. Let's talk about these two.
Yeah, my favorite mid lane, and we did talk about Niski being this, I'm going to pressure the whole map, but the way Jinsen has been playing this split, since it's such a different style than Niski, and since he's playing it at such a high level, I gave Jinsen the edge for this matchup. I know the fans won't agree with me, but the way that Jinsen right now is playing is actually insane, because this is the style of mid lane that we criticize will not work anymore. So for him to make it work, it means he's overperforming relative to other mid laners in the league. And Niski is just, up there as well. You can't really ever ignore this guy, because if you just give him a free lane, if you're not pressuring him, he's just going to pressure the whole map. So we will see. This looks like they have a lot of shared champions, but a big qualifier here is Niski's played Galio 4 times. So most of Niski's champions, he's only played once. And then on Jensen's side, he's played Azir that many times. So we're looking at like a Galio versus Azir player. It'd be really funny if we get that matchup, because it's their most played. And it would be fun for them to kind of challenge each other. Like, you can have your best champ, and let's see how we can perform.
Yeah, quantity of games definitely is something not on that graphic. A lot more games in each other's, carry champ versus support champ. And I do think in terms of individual 1v1, I have to give it to Jensen, which is why I have myself aligned with probably on that slider. I do think, he's the better individual mechanical player, laner, and these kinds of things. A lot of Niski's attributes come in team synergy and things like that.
Now, Crumbs, you were the only one who threw your weight behind Niski, so just a real quick hit on why you went that direction instead of Jensen.
The champions he plays can easily forgo the laning phase and assist the rest of the team. So Jensen usually beats up on weaker mid laners. Niski is not that. So at worst he goes even. At best he just roams and has his work cut out with Blabber.
Next, let's talk about the duo lane, starting with the AD carries. You got the young gun in Tactical looking to fill big shoes in a huge split for Team Liquid up against the veteran and star AD carry in Sven.
Tactical's been great. He has definitely overperformed a lot of people's expectations, myself included. The problem is he's going up against the best performing AD carry in the league right now in Sven, who doesn't get much jungle help, and especially in their last matchup, despite being way down in jungle proximity and resources, he was still up in gold. And that's kind of the overall story a lot of the time for C9's bot lane, is they are so hard to punish, and they still are getting their own advantages.
Sven is Mr. Consistent. Remember how long it took for him to die in Spring Split, and that's the same kind of playstyle he's carried throughout Summer. And the worst games have been the ones when they come out with a weaker laning phase with the Wukong and Descendant, but if you put them on the Kallistas like we saw them take against Immortals yesterday, they're going to have a strong matchup for creating pressure on the map, which combines well with Niski and Blabber, and suddenly you're being assaulted from all three lanes, and that is what they really count on, to be having a bottom lane that creates pressure.
Now, as always, probably the most interesting thing about the bot lane is that it is a duo lane. So it's not just these two AD carries that are going up against each other in isolation. They've got these two masterful supports behind them, Vulcan and CoreJJ.
Yeah, and gotta say, CoreJJ's resurgence has been really nice to see, because he was such an important player for Team Liquid, and then in spring when they were slumping, he just was kind of gone. But now we have him back, and right now this is a challenge to Vulcan. Right now Vulcan is the premier support from spring. The only thing against him is he has the highest duo proximity, I think, of any support in the league. So the fact that he's with Sven so much is one that's like, we kind of would rather see these supports roam. And that's where the Bard pick comes in for CoreJJ, and I think that's the one champion that CoreJJ has been outperforming any other support on. But on the other hand, Vulcan is, I think Vulcan is doing better than CoreJJ in lane, so that's why I edge it towards Vulcan's side.
I'm kind of...
Okay, sorry, go ahead, Mark.
No, I'm on the CoreJJ train. You go pump Vulcan up some more before I tear you guys down.
Okay, yeah, let me pump up Vulcan, because I'm hearing your guys' argument. You're saying Cloud9 is too good, so Vulcan has nothing to do but stay with his AD and protect him. Therefore, his job is easier, whereas CoreJJ, his team doesn't do anything. He has to do all the work. He has to roam, and so he looks to be a lot stronger that way. So to me, it sounds like team diff. I still think that Vulcan is pretty damn strong, and the fact that he's had Yuumi games is, I think, what makes him so hard to remember, because he's literally inside other champions, and you're like, well, I guess he was there.
I mean, I was the only one who put it in Core JJ's favor. I think the duo percent is a big show that all they have to do is win lane, and they do that pretty easily. But Core JJ is actually going out, influencing the map, and helping take over the game. You watch their bar performances. Vulcans was a joke compared to Core JJ's. I'm on the Core JJ hype train.
Some thoughts from my three analysts on each of the individual matchups. Though, to get a former analyst take on the matchup, we caught up with our old pal Jack to hear about his battle for first.
Especially when looking at C9, like versus Team Liquid, it's mostly about teamwork. Like the thing that made C9, I think, as successful as they were in the spring split was how well they communicated and how well they were all on the same page. So the biggest thing that this will hinge on is like, how connected are both teams, right? How well do they set up for the fight? How on the same page are they when they make their engages? And then there's all the other stuff that you still have to worry about, like laning mechanics or draft or stuff like that. But the biggest thing that if both teams prepare well and draft well, that it will hinge on is just team play. I think the goal of winning Summer Split has always been there. But you don't explicitly state it like every week along the way. I think the closer we get to playoffs, the closer we get to finals, the more that's going to become just like the singular focus. But week over week, we still have like a specific gameplay goal that we're going for or a specific opponent that we're trying to beat this week. So week to week, our short-term goals change, but the long-term goal is the same, which is, win Summer Split and keep improving. I think a win against C9 would be really big. So many people see them as the bar for teams in North America, but the more important thing I think with the win is we would even our head-to-head against them and have a tie or lead a first place depending on what the results are on Saturday. So the thing that we ultimately need to be able to do is beat C9 in the best of 5 when playoffs come.
The stage is set for a big battle for first place in our second game of the day between both Team Liquid and Cloud9. But as we get into our predictions for the remainder of the games in the day, we're looking to the FlyQuest Fish Gods for their insight into today's matches.
Off the mark and probably wrong are beating us. I think they're bad at video games. You bald mammal. Humans had the big brains but couldn't predict the FlyQuest 2-0. Solo had the top lane all wrapped up. Why is it so dark in here? Because we predicted evil geniuses. Did you see Mark's tweet? Fish are friends, not food. Mark, more like shark, considering how much fish he was gobbling down. How do we beat Mark? Predict the upset. Liquid, liquid, liquid. Water is better than air. What kind of dummy breathes air? Counter logic, counter logic. No. Too far. You have the predicting aptitude of an electric eel. Red light party for 100 thieves. Woo! Oh, they couldn't predict their way out of a coral reef.
Shots fired by the. I don't think they were aware that their mics were hot, gentlemen. But you guys are facing some fire there from the
Mark
being
really
called out straight up.
I mean, they called me a shark. Isn't that a compliment? I watch Shark
know,
Tank,
my friend.
and it just means you're business savvy,
Fish
right?
are
Like,
friends,
know.
not food. You know what I do love? Is that the fish still had their limits. They weren't willing to predict CLG. No. Too far.
Their brains may be 1/15,000th of our size, but even they know not to bet on CLG.
Yep. And with that, we're taking a look at all three of your predictions for the day. The only difference coming in that fourth game of the day, 100 Thieves is the call for Crumbs. So Crumbs, why them over Golden Guardians?
Weeks are closing in. I got to make my moves, so I want to take first place. So I got to pick the ones where I know they're going to be picking Golden Guardians. And 100 Thieves played early game solid yesterday. It's the reason why I went all in on them in the stock market. I think that this team has a good strength of schedule, and playing early game is going to work for them. Contracts is having a really good half split, the split he's come in, so I like what I'm seeing out of them.
That's game 4, of course, for the day. We've got 4 big ones, actually, when it comes to our schedule. Dig, EG, Cloud9, TL, CLG versus TSM, and Golden Guardians versus 100 Thieves. Let's kick it over to our casters to get us into that first game of the day.